Hello YouTube, today we are finally going to be doing some crafting. If you haven't seen the previous videos, I definitely recommend you do watch them before this tutorial, and I'll have the links down in the description below. And well, what we have here for this tutorial is just simply two items that we can craft: an arrow and a bow. The arrow consumes 2 wood, and so if I craft this, I see the debug log statement that we crafted an arrow, 2 wood vanishes, and we have an arrow right here in the inventory. Now, the inventory does not contain 2 wood anymore, or actually no wood, and we cannot craft any more arrows. Now you can see that we don't have enough ingredients to craft an arrow, and in the inventory tab we have still just 1 arrow. So, if you're ready, let's start. And as always, you can get this scene and this scene at the end of the tutorial from the links down below. So first off, go to your scripts folder and let's create a new C# script. Let's call this script the stat item, for example, and open it up in your favorite editor. But also open up the item script right here. So I'm going to split this tab to the right so you can actually see what's going on in here. If you are new to class inheritance, let me give you a simple, fast crash course. So, the public class item inherits from a scriptable object, which is a Unity class, basically. So, let's do our own inheritance. So, the stat item is going to inherit from the item. That means that we can access all the public properties in this class right here, even if we don't declare it. This means that we do not need to declare these in here. So, if I create an, so let's just copy this on the top right here too. And we have to make it system serializable, and again, file name, let's call it stat name, stat item. Now if I go to Unity and the prefabs folder, this is just a demonstration, you don't really need to do this, I'm going to delete it anyways. Go to item and stat item. Now if I just click on this, I see the name and icon right here, and the script is called item on it. If I go to the stat item, we also have a name and an icon, but the script is called stat item. Since we inherit from the item script, we can use these 2 properties here too. And especially because they're public, we see them. So if I now just go in here and type public override void use right there, I can actually override this function. So base.use will still call the inside of the function in here, and now we can actually add something in here. Let's first create a public enum. Let's call this public. Let's make a public enum stat item type. So let's make a health item. Let's make a thirst item. And let's make a food item. Also, we can declare more properties. So if I go, let's make a public stat item type. And let's make this, let's call this item type. And just like that. Now if we go back to Unity, right here. And again, in the prefabs items folder, we can now right click, create, and go to items and stat item. Now if I call this the health item, and I can also then call this the, let's say, name health potion. And as icon, I can just select a bit, let's say, that berry, doesn't really matter. And as item type, I want to select the health item right here. So let's now go to our manager and get this slowly working. So if I go to the game manager, just make a public void on stat item use. And just pass in the stat item type, and let's also pass in a amount. Like that, you'll see what I want to do. And just make a debug.log, zooming, item type that we passed in, and then also a add amount, and the amount. And let's also make a singleton out of the game manager. So make a region, singleton, and then a end region here, and a public static game manager instance, and then on the awake function, if the instance is equal to null, then just make the instance, whoops, not the interface, get the instance, then make the instance equal to this. Here, collapse that, and let's go to the stat item. Now we want also a amount, public int amount, this is going to be the amount of, let's say, the health potion, or let's say water bottle, like the amount you want to add to your stats. So just go to the game manager instance and then access the on stat item use, and now we want to pass in the stat item type, so item type and the amount right there, like that, just simple. And also once you use up an item, you actually want to remove it, so we have to make a function for that. So let's open the inventory file for that, and let's make a remove function, a public void remove item, and just go pass in an item. And what we want to do in here is inventory item list dot remove, and remove the item, just like that, clean and simple. And then just item change callback dot invoke. Simple, right? Just invoke the on item change callback function once you use up an item. So go back to the stat item script right here and go to inventory instance and then remove item and pass in this. So now it's going to be removed from the inventory after you use it. And I'm sorry, I made a little mistake last time, and just go to your inventory UI script, and where you have the update inventory UI function, the for loop where I is less or equal to item.count, just go remove the equal to. I don't know how that happened. Let's try it out. So go to our prefabs and items, and let's create a new stat item right here. So right click, create an item and stat item. Let's call this food item and go to it, and let's name it steak. And select the icon, let's say the raw meat icon, and this is going to be a food item. It's going to give you, let's say, 10 food, whatever. And the health item, let's make that give you, let's say, 25 right here, okay? Go to your berry and let's say capital P. Also go to your game manager and drag and drop the food item in the item list and the health item right here. So what should happen right now if I press the play button? If I consume a food item, it's going to call the game manager. So let's go open I and press a couple of times X. Now this is the health item, the berry. So if I click that, it's going to say using berry, which is basically called using this use function in the item script, okay? Now, consuming a health item at amount 10. So it's consuming a health item right here, this item, and it's adding amount, the 25 I mean. It's adding 25 health right here. And if I consume the steak right here, now using steak, as we said in the items, and now consuming food item because we set the item type to food on the steak right here, and add amount 10. So that's how inheritance and that kind of stuff works. And now these still does, you can't really use them, they do nothing when we use them, it just writes using, and these we remove after using them. That would probably make sense in your game too. So let's get on with the tutorial. Go to the scripts folder and let's create a C# script and call that crafting recipe. Open it up, and again let it derive from the item script, and now go to the item and again copy these two lines so we don't have to write them out right there, and go to item and let's make a new menu name. Let's call this the crafting recipe and / base recipe. Like that. And what we want to do in here, so we need, when we are crafting something, we need some kind of ingredients and then a result. So the result is going to be a public item. We want a item from a crafting recipe. Let's call this the result. And we also want ingredients. So ingredients, what could be ingredients? So let's make a simple class, a public class and ingredient. Like that. This is basically just a kind of a struct, just a holder for something. And let's make a public item in here. Let's call this item, and then a public int. Let's call this amount. So let's make a public ingredient array and call this ingredients. Right here. We can have one or even multiple ingredients, right? For every single recipe that we can do. Yeah. And now we actually need a function to check if we can craft an item. So private void can craft. So what we want to do in the can craft function is ask the inventory object if there are enough resources. So let's go to our inventory script. So let's make a function. Let's say public bool is going to return true if we can craft it, so contains item. Or if it actually inventory contains a given item. Let's say item, let's pass in an item and a int amount. So now let's loop through our item list, inventory item list. This is the list that contains all the items in the inventory currently available. Let's go int item counter is going to be equal to 0. So for each loop, for each, let's say, item I in inventory. So let's loop through every single item in the inventory item list and check if I is going to be equal to the item that we want to look for. Just increase the item counter. Plus plus like that. And now if the item counter is more or equal to the amount that we need, we kind of like, if we need, let's say 3 wood for a bow and we only have 2 wood, we want it to be false. But if we have 4 wood, we still want it to be true, obviously, right? So then return true. And else return false. We don't have enough items for the given recipe. And now we also want a function that can delete multiple instances of an item. Or so let's make a public void. Let's say remove items, and let's make a item again and int amount, basically the same. And now for int I is going to equal to 0 while I is less than the amount, and plus plus I, and just remove item right there. You're going to call this function the remove item function right here and pass in an item and just remove the item and then invoke the function right here. Awesome, easy and awesome. So that's it with the inventory for the script. And let's go back to the crafting recipe right here. How do we check if we can craft a recipe or an item from a recipe? We need to loop through each individual ingredient in the ingredients array, even if it's just one, and ask the inventory if we have enough items. So let's get that started. So let's make a simple for each loop and make a ingredient in ingredients. Let's make a bool contains current ingredient, and that's going to be equal to the inventory dot instance dot contains item. And what do we want to pass in an item? So each ingredient class right here has an item and a amount. So just pass in the item for this ingredient, item, and then a ingredient dot amount. It's just basically like if you're baking a cake, the ingredients lists, let's say, flour and butter, and you have, let's say, 600 grams or whatever, ounces, whatever, of flour. That's an ingredient and an amount. Right here, it's basically the same. If now we have a true or false statement, basically, if the inventory has what we need. So if the inventory does not contain what we need, we want to return false from the canCraft function, because we cannot craft it. Even if we miss like literally 1 gram, we cannot craft it. And this is not a void function, sorry, this is a bool. If we have everything we need in the inventory, we just want to return true. Now we want to override the use function again. So let's go public override void use. We don't need the base statement this time, just delete it. We have to check if we can craft. Can craft right here. Then we want to continue and actually remove the items. If we have everything we need for this recipe, we want to remove the items and then add a item to the inventory. So let's remove the items. Let's make a function for that again. Let's make a private void remove items from inventory. Or let's say ingredients, probably better. Let's say remove ingredients. Again, let's copy this for each loop or write it out, doesn't really matter. Like that. We want to loop through each ingredient in the ingredients array. And then just go to the inventory, instance.remove items s with an s, and then just pass in again the ingredient dot item and the ingredient dot amount. Easy and simple. So now we call this function. You remove ingredients from inventory function and then just add the item to the inventory. So not debug.log. Let's make an inventory.instance dot add item, and then we want to add the result like that. Now let's make a else just for debug purposes. Let's make a debug.log. Don't have enough ingredients to craft. Let's access the name. We can access it because we derive from the item, and the item has a property called name, and it's a string. So just write out the name of the item, recipe basically in here, right? Okay. Or you can just do the recipe result.name like that. It's probably even better. The result item has a name property, and in here we can do a debug.log. You just crafted and again the result.name, and we need to actually add a tag, a system.serializable, so it can show up in the inspector. Just a Unity thing you have to do. So this public class ingredients has to be system.serializable, and that's the whole crafting recipe. That's all we need. Okay, oops, here's an error. Result ingredient.amount, and yeah, that's it for the script. Go to Unity and open up your inventory UI. We still need to kind of actually set up the crafting recipes because we haven't done that so far. What we want to do in here, we want to instantiate the item slot prefab right here, but we want to instantiate in the crafting tab right here. So not the inventory item transform, but we need to make a public transform, and let's call this the crafting tab transform. The crafting, let's say item transform right here. It's going to be basically the same exact object, just in the crafting tab, not in the inventory tab. And we also need to somehow get all the crafting recipes from somewhere right here. Okay, so let's go to the game manager, an excellent object for that, and just make a public list. Let's make an item list, and let's call this crafting recipes. Make this equal to a new list of items. Actually, this is an item right here, list of items. This class in here is called crafting recipe, but since it inherits from an item class, we can also interchange those. I mean, interchange those downwards. You cannot use, instead of the item class, you cannot use the crafting recipe class, but instead of the crafting recipe class, you can use the item class, because the crafting recipe inherits from the item. So everything the item has to be in the crafting recipe, right? Every property, function, everything. What we want to do is access the public override void use, right here, the use function. This, we don't need to access it from another script, so it doesn't matter. Internally, we call this function from the item, basically reference to it, and then this will call the other functions. That works perfectly fine. So let's get that going. So the crafting recipes list, a public list, and now we want a setup function. Let's call this function a private void setup crafting recipes like that, and just let's first off get the recipes. So let's make a list of items, crafting recipes, and just make that equal to the game manager .instance.crafting recipes. So let's get the list with all the crafting recipes in the game. Let's now make a for each loop. So for each, let's just make a item, or let's call this recipe in crafting recipes. And what we want to do is just instantiate a game object. Let's call this go, and is equal to instantiate. And what we want to instantiate, a item slot prefab. And the parent to this is going to be the crafting item transform, because the grid layout will take care of everything else. And now the item slot script right here, the let's say slot is going to be equal to game object.get component, and we want to get the item slot component of this game object, and now just slot.add item, and we want to add the recipe to that. Like that. And now we just need to call this function in the start function right here to actually set it up. If you go to Unity to the prefabs.items folder right here. We can actually create, let's create a new item, a base item. Let's call this arrow, and just name it, let's say arrow, and an icon. I have an arrow icon in here. Now let's also create a crafting recipe. Let's call this base recipe, and let's call this arrow recipe. Now what we want to do for the arrow recipe, the name, let's call this arrow recipe, and the icon, we want to select the arrow again, the same icon as the arrow right here, the arrow recipe, and the result is going to be an item, and let's make this item the arrow. Now ingredients, let's make one ingredient for this. Let's expand that and add an item. What do we want to use? Let's make the arrow out of wood only. And how much wood do we want to use? Let's say 2 wood right here, okay? Let's create a new item just for testing purposes. Let's make a base item. Let's call this bow. And let's call this item bow, and the icon is going to be the bow icon. And let's make a new crafting recipe for the bow, just like here, base recipe. Let's call this bow recipe. And again, click on that, and the name is going to be bow recipe. The icon is going to be the bow, the same icon as the bow recipe. The same icon as the bow, and then the result is going to be a bow. And the size, let's say 2 ingredients right here. And let's expand both of them. The first ingredient is going to be wood, and let's say we want to consume 1 wood. And let's say the second ingredient is going to be stone, and let's say we want to use 2 stone. So for 1 bow, we want to use 1 wood and 2 stone right here, okay? Now, go to the game manager. And for crafting recipes, just expand it as 2. We have 2 recipes, and we want to add the bow recipe. And we want to add the arrow recipe right here, okay? Now we still need to go to the inventory UI. And for the crafting item transform, we need to put in the crafting tab right here. We can actually set that to active so you can see what we're doing. Like that, go to 2D so you can see that. And the inventory tab, let's make it inactive. Let's make the crafting tab active. And go to the scroll view, viewport, and content. And let's delete everything we have in here. And then go to the canvas. And right here, the crafting item transform, go to the crafting tab and the content right here. Content under the crafting tab, and just put that in here, the content rect transform. You can also rename this to, let's say the crafting item parent. So you can distinguish it from the other one like that, and just set that to inactive again. Set this to active, and the inventory parent inactive right here. Awesome. Now, if we start the game and open up our inventory and go to the crafting tab, we see 2 items in here because if you go in the script right here in the inventory UI, we set up the crafting recipes right here instantly, right here at the start function. First thing we want to do, populate these 2 fields. Now, if you go back to Unity and actually go to inventory tab and hit a couple of times X, so we have a couple stone and whatnot, and consume these, get these out of the way. Okay, like that. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wood and 3 stone. So as you know, the arrow consumes 1 wood to get crafted. So if I have here, we have 1, 2, 3, we have 6 wood, and if I click on the arrow, you just crafted an arrow in the debug.log statements. Let's clear that out and craft another arrow. So we should have 2 arrows and 4 wood right now. We have, oh okay, I mean the arrow recipe, whoops, it consumes 2 wood right here. Sorry for that. So we have 6 minus 4, that's 2 wood, and we have 2 arrows, and nothing happens when I click on the arrow, just using arrow because it's a stationary item. And now, if I go to the bow recipe, we have to consume 1 wood and 2 stone. That means we can craft 2 stone and 1 wood. We can craft 1 bow right here. Okay, if I hit the bow, you just crafted a bow. So we have 1 wood. We have this left, and we have a bow. Nothing happens when I click on it again. So now we have 1 stone and 1 wood. So that means that we cannot craft a bow because we don't have 2 stone available in our inventory. So if I hit the bow, you don't have enough ingredients to craft a bow. Awesome, it works. Now, if I go to the arrow recipe, we need 2 wood to craft an arrow. So again, if I go to the crafting tab and hit the arrow button, you don't have enough ingredients to craft the arrow because we only have one wood in our inventory. So that's basically our simple yet effective and working crafting system. So if you enjoyed this video, and I bet you did, you should definitely subscribe, like the video, share, comment, everything you can do. And yeah, I hope I'll see you in the next one.